Well, good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
What you see behind us is a white G35, which could only mean one thing. Well, it could mean multiple things, but today it only means one thing: Car Stereo Lab. And today we have another great series in store for you. This one, we're gonna be testing out the Ground Zero Uranium series. Speakers, amps, and subs. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. A while back we had Tommy on from Ground Zero. We talked about getting our hands on some of the uranium product to put in the lab to test out, see how it sounded, and report back to you guys on our thoughts on that. So with the equipment in hand, we're gonna take the lab back apart and load it down with all this gear, and we got a ton of it. So let's start, since he's already got the door panel off, and let's take a look at the 6.5 mid-bass as well as the tweeter that's gonna go into the car. Let's take a look at the Uranium Series GZ UK 165 SQs. Sound quality mid kick woofer. If you flip the box over, they give you your mounting depth, 2.48 inches, your width, which is 6.5 inches, your inside width, which is 5.67 inches. They also give you a ton of specifications. This is a Kipple optimized driver. The Kipple's the giant machine that gives us all our teal small parameters. Black anodized aluminum cone, GZ designed aluminum cast basket, high efficient linearized neodymium motor, durable rubber surround, gold plated terminals, GZ designed hexagon protection grille, resonance frequency of 54.6 hertz, power handling of 120 watts with a max of 180 watts. Efficiency is 87 dB with an impedance of 4 ohms. Sounds pretty sexy to me. Let's open this thing up. This has a slide on cover for the box. Ooh, takes us this beautiful piece of foam. Inside you'll find the owner's manual. On one side it is in German, on the other side it is in English. Just read them. A lot of this stuff, if anything, will make you smile. Thank you for choosing a Ground Zero product, and welcome to your new Uranium Series loudspeaker. This is the owner's manual providing instructions on the operation and installation of this SQ series speaker. Please read it carefully. If you have any further questions, please contact your local Ground Zero dealer or your regional distribution partner. This speaker is one of the most important parts of your car audio system. However, it will only be able to deliver its full performance when each part of the whole system is tuned carefully, matching each other. Therefore, we recommend consulting a car audio specialist to compile the desired surround system as well as for installation and tuning. We hope you will enjoy the sound quality of an authentic development by Ground Zero engineering team. Ooh, see what I mean? These things are fun to read. Products belonging in the Ground Zero Uranium series stand for high-end sound quality or extreme power handling capability. Enough reading, let's get to the actual speakers themselves. There's a couple little bags at the top and bottom. This one here has some butyl in it for attaching these grills, as well as they come with some Ground Zero logos. Comes with 4 of them, as a matter of fact. The top pocket has some screws. The whole speaker itself with the grill is all wrapped in one bag. The reason they do that is so that the grill doesn't fall off and accidentally do any harm to the speakers, and when you go to pick them up, it's all in one nice bag. With it out of the bag, let's take a closer look. It's a 2-part grill with a mesh front. As you can see, it has this little dent in it, and the holes are nice and big. If you are using the grill, this will allow for optimum air to flow through and not restrict the movement of the driver. There is also a dent here for the logo if you want to use them, which you can see there. The grill has a beveled edge to it, and the mesh will line up and snap into place. And it is a nice tight fit. Let's take a closer look at speaker. The gold-plated terminals are located here. One of the unique things I really like about these is that you have a screw-on as well as a slide-on terminal. The tinsel leads are covered. Inside you can see the blue voice coil. It has a 2-inch voice coil that attaches to an aluminum cone, and here's the rubber surround. You can also see the black ghosted-in Ground Zero logo on the dust cap. Flipping the driver over, we can see that neodymium motor structure, the custom-made Ground Zero basket that they use for this particular driver. The frequency response of this particular driver is 40 Hz to 3.5 $1,000. As you can see here, the basket also has multiple holes for mounting options. As far as fit and finish go for this particular driver, I'm really digging this copper color here on the back. I kind of wish they would have put that somewhere on the front of the driver, maybe made the logo that color, but I get it. I also dig the fact that this is all stealth black. It looks really nice. And through a grill, the last thing I think you'd want to see is a big copper color on this. This will look through and look very factory, however, it will not give you that factory sound. The Ground Zero logo is located here, open up to the venting of the speaker. You can see the spider here and of course the back side of the spider there. It just feels really nice in your hand. This rounding here of the magnet, just and of course the vented pole piece here, it's a pretty substantial size. They did a really nice job on this. I can't wait to hear it. And no mid-bass would be complete without its best friend, the tweeter. And we have the Uranium Series GZUT28SQ. It's a 1.1 inch 4 ohm tweeter with 130 watt power handling. Flipping it over to the back, we have more of that data on it, as well as the size specifications of the tweeter. 1.2 inches thick, that is from the top of the grill to the bottom of the magnet, and it is 1.73 inches wide. The thickness of the plastic trim ring around it is 0.47 inches, almost a half inch. The mounting cup is going to have an opening of 1.89 inches. All the way out to the trim is going to be 2.3 inches. The depth is 0.83 inches. Zooming in a little closer, we have coated silk dome tweeter, neodymium magnet with dampened ventilation, 1.1 inch CCA voice coil. Resonance frequency is 1300 hertz. Power handling is 80 to that peak 130. Efficiency is 90 dBs. And with that, let's open these up and take a look at these. They have the same slide off top and that same beautiful piece of foam. Inside is the owner's manual, just like previous, German one side, English the other. It says the exact same thing here as the mid-range and gives you those specifications that we just looked at on the back of the box. The frequency response of this tweeter is 2500 hertz to 25,000 hertz. Inside the box, there's a bag in the middle. This has our locking clamps for the flush mounts and the tweeters themselves. They use the same grill as the mid-bass, so you have a nice big open area. If you'll look here, it's huge how far that dome sticks out. The grill is glued into place. If you did want to remove it, I'm sure you could. It has a nice open air feel. I don't really see the need to remove this guy. To get it out of the mount, just twist the tweeter and push from the bottom. On the back side of the tweeter, you can see the vented neodymium magnet. It has a black piece of cotton in it. Look at that dome. That's a beautiful silk soft dome right there. Ooh. It's heavy too. It's very heavy. Inside the box are no crossovers. This is made to be an active set. One of the things about the Uranium speakers is that you can buy them a la carte. That's why we have just a box with tweeters and just a box with a mid-bass. They also sell a mid-range to go along with these. The wiring on this, you have a stripe and a solid. The owner's manual does not indicate which is positive and what is negative. We're going to test that because we are going to be installing these in a car. To do that, we'll use our Mobile Solutions PT9A Plus and attach our positive and negative test leads onto the speaker. It'll start making a popping noise. Doing red, that means we have it backwards. Flipping them around, and we have green now. Stripe is going to be positive. Solid is going to be negative. If you're wondering if the tweeter can get any smaller than this, the answer to that is no. This is the actual size of the tweeter. This is the whole tweeter. This is as small as this will get. Keep that in mind when you're thinking of mounting locations. Obviously, this is a cup that you can mold into whatever you'd like. This is all you have for mounting. No system would be complete without adding the subwoofer, and for this we have the Ground Zero GZUW10SQX Uranium subwoofer. This is the improved Q version. On the back of the box they do give some of the specifications. Let's wait until we get into it. I want to take a look at this thing first. Flipping the top up, we have the owner's manual. They give you all your teal small parameters for building your own custom box, or if you look over here and on these area, they give you some recommended enclosures. We have the 10-inch vented, 1.4 cubic feet with a 3.15 inch port, 8.27 inches long, gonna be tuned around 31 hertz, band pass 4th order, as well as sealed. Sealed, we're looking anywhere between 0.7 to 1.59 cubic feet. All these pages, if you want to do more research on them, are located on their website. Has a top piece of cardboard, as well as several other pieces of cardboard. These are in there to protect the surround. It comes with a gasket for the back of the woofer, and then the woofer itself that is substantially heavy. It also has magnet protectors located on here so that the woofer you don't drop it and crack the magnet. Fairly robust shipping enclosure. The first thing I noticed when I pull it out of the bag is just like that mid bass, it's a black on black design. The Ground Zero logo is ghosted into the dust cap. When I get a woofer, naturally the first thing I want to do is move the cone, feel the cone, test the surround, and just take a look at it all. Grab it, flip it over, take a look at the backside. Just like the mid bass, it has that copper backside. It has a grill over the vented pole piece. It is a custom built aluminum basket made to mimic that mid-range. It has this same armature that the mid-range had. This is a dual voice coil. Unlike a standard slide-on terminal, this woofer has more of like an amplifier where you have an Allen screw here. You slide your ferrule covered wires into the holes here and tighten it down. It's kind of cool. I like that. These are the little touches that they do that they just feel really nice and they look really cool. The tinsel leads are insulated going into the spider, but then as you can see, it is an exposed tinsel lead that weaves through the spider. The magnet does have a rubber boot over it, which I don't want to peel off. Looks like it'll screw up my cool sticker that's on the back. Now that I've felt it up a little bit, let's go back and take a look at some of those specs that they have on this. Voice coil diameter is going to be 2 inches. This is a dual 2 ohm driver. FS is 41.6. Efficiency is 87.2. The size of the outer diameter of the woofer is 10.3 inches. The mounting diameter is 9.29 inches. And the depth of the woofer is 5.83 inches. Power handling is 450 watts. Now, as far as the makeup of the woofer, it is a pressed and coated paper cone. It has a Kapton voice coil informer. The surround is a foam, and it does have this removable style screw covered gasket here that a lot of the woofers do have, made out of rubber. Looking at the side of the driver, this is a mesh grill. Inside, of course, you can see the voice coil. Feels really nice. It feels really well built. With that being said, well, I hope it makes me feel really good once we get it into the car and start listening to it. Today we have the Ground Zero Uranium 6-channel amplifier, model number GZUA 6.200 SQ Plus. It's a 6-channel amplifier with 1400 watts max, 2 ohm stable, and adjustable bias control. That in itself is one of the coolest features built into this amplifier, which we're going to talk about, of course. So let's open this thing up and take a look at what comes in it. First up, right on top, is the owner's manual. 2 copies of it, one in English, one in German. There's a little envelope here off to the side. Inside of that is the mounting brackets for the amplifier. They have a piece of cardboard between them so they don't get scratched. Piece of foam. This is the amplifier, and you'll notice it's kind of unique. It's got it's a pillow, and it's heavy, really heavy. Stand it up on one side and slowly pull it out. Yeah. Ooh, soft. This monster is what is inside. First off, it's huge. Let's find out just how big. Without the feet attached, we're at 21 3/4 long, 8 1/4 inches deep, 1 7/8 inches tall. This is a big amplifier, big footprint, goes back to the good old days where if you wanted a high quality amplifier, it was gonna be big. And this is big. Now taking a minute to go back to the owner's manual, which is where all the specs are. They make 3 amplifiers in this series, a 2 2500, a 4 150, and of course the 6 200, which is right here. Common features, they're all 2 ohms stable on the stereo channels, 1 ohm stable on the 2 2550 per channel that's not bridged, so it'll do 1 ohm on channel 1 and 1 ohm on channel 2. Adjustable bias controls for each channel separately, high-end WEMA capacitors, latest Burr Brown operational amplifier, status LEDs, wide band adjustable high pass and low pass filters, band patch feature with active low pass high pass filters, adjustable input sensitivity, soft delayed remote turn on. And then if you're getting into the 2.250, this basically the sub amp of this, you have a bass control, phase shift, bass boost, and then they all have thermal, speaker short circuit overload, overcurrent protection, and a temperature sensor controlled cooling fan. Now for those of you that don't take the time or the pleasure to read an owner's manual, well, you should. Not for the fact that it's an owner's manual that's telling you what to do, which none of us like to be told what to do, but just because of what they put into the actual owner's manual. It's a lot of common sense stuff that, well, let's be honest, a lot of people don't necessarily use common sense. As a precaution, it is recommended to disconnect the battery. Power supply wire has to be protected within 8 inches of the main fuse holder with matching fuse value. That's saying that they want a fuse holder within 8 inches of the battery, and they want it to add up to the amount of fusing the amplifier has on it. This has 4 30 amp fuses. It's 120 amps. They want you to put a 120 amp fuse underneath the hood within 8 inches. If necessary, replace a defective fuse, buy a new one of identical value. Never drill a hole in a vehicle's gas tank, brake lines, or any other important vehicle part. Never pass wires over sharp edges. Keep the wiring away from antennas and electrical devices contributing to radio reception. Install power supply wiring locally separated from the speaker wiring. Basically run power down one side, speaker down the other. The amplifier contains a temperature protection circuit that turns the device off in the case of overheating. Once cooled down, it'll turn back on. Therefore, don't put something over the top of the amplifier. The amplifier should not be mounted on a strongly vibrating part or surface, i.e. subwoofer enclosures. Don't mount this to a subwoofer enclosure. It's right there. If preamplifier outputs, RCAs, are available on the head unit, it is recommended to make use of them. And then the warning down here says don't play it loud, you could lose your hearing. These are always fun to read. So that takes us through the basics of any amplifier you're going to install. This is kind of like the common sense page. But once we flip over onto page 2, now we get the goodies. They give you a breakdown of all 3 of the amplifiers in case you're wondering what they were and how they're used. Ours is the one here on the bottom, which we'll actually just take a look at the physical amplifier and go over all these things here. The amplifier is broken into 4 segments. Over here on the far right, we have the power input side. Then we have channels 5 and 6, 3 and 4, and 1 and 2. They're basically all the same with the exception of 2 switches, one here and one here. Those are mode 2 and mode 4. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take a look at all these other things first. Channel 1 and 2 is 110 watts by 2 at 4 ohms, 160 watts by 2 at 2 ohms. You can also bridge it at 4 ohms and it'll give you 320 watts. For wiring, it starts with channel 1, positive, negative, and then channel 2 is also positive and negative. For bridging, use channel 1 positive, channel 2 negative. First up is the low pass crossover, which is variable between 20 and 400 Hertz, as well as 200 to 4000. And how that's achieved is by this switch here, which is a one-time or times 10 multiplier switch. If left out like it is now, it'll just be the 200, 400. If you press it in, it turns it to 200 and 4000. You can turn the low pass filter on or off. The high pass clones the same frequencies, that 20 to 400, 200 to 4000. The 10-time multiplier switch is also in the same spot, as well as the on and off. These are like this, so if you wanted, you could use channels 1 and 2 for a subwoofer, you could use channels 1 and 2 for a tweeter, or you could use channel 1 and 2 for a mid bass. Because If you turn both of these on, you now have a bandpass channel, allowing you to use both the high pass and low pass filter. All the channels on the amplifier are going to clone this same setup. That means that every channel on the amplifier is a high pass, low pass, or bandpass output. The very last knob located here is your gain control, which is 1 to 6 volts of variation. That input mode 2 switch is located next to the RCAs. To turn on input mode 2, press the button in. To turn it off, leave the button out. We'll come back to these. Channel 3 and 4 is next, and it is a mirrored image of channels 1 and 2. It's going to start with the input 4 mode, on and off, the gain control, your high pass, and your low pass crossover. This channel also mirrors the same power, that 110 watts by 2, or the 160 at 2 ohms, 320 mono, which takes us to 5 and 6. 5 and 6, first up is the gain control. It also has the bandpass crossover. What makes channel 5 and 6 different from 1 through 4 is we now have 160 watts at 4 ohms, 280 watts at 2 ohms, and a 560 watts if we bridge it at 4 ohm. Essentially turning this into a 5-channel amplifier. Power and protect lights are located next to the speakers. White is on and functioning perfectly. Red is in protect. The 4 30-amp fuses, as well as battery, 4-gauge input, remote, and ground is the last one located here. Mode 2 and Mode 4. Those are a really cool feature built into this amplifier depending on how you want to use it. If both of them are off, it's a 6-channel input. If you're going to use it as a 5-channel amplifier, which I know a lot of people you probably will, you have front input, rear input, and sub. If you wanted to use this amplifier to do, let's say, a 3-way set, tweeter, mid-range, mid-bass, if you push in mode 2, what that'll allow you to do is just run a single RCA into inputs 1 and 2, and they will populate all the others. Channel 1 will populate 3 and 5. Channel 2 will populate 4 and 6. That allows you to use all the bandpass crossovers that are on this and just have one set of inputs in. Mode 4 allows you to run a single RCA into 1 and 2, but when pressed, will have 3 and 4 populate 5 and 6. This one is kind of interesting. The idea behind it is that 1 and 2 would be front, 3 and 4 would be rear, and then 5 and 6 would just come off of your rear. However, there's a lot more options for that one that I'd like to talk about. Keep in mind that 5 and 6 have more power. It's 160 watts. If we were to turn this on, mode 4, right off the bat, if we used 1 and 2 for rear, that would put the front RCA into this and use that to populate channels 5 and 6. The reason for that is being able to control your subwoofer with your fronts. If you're using this in a factory system, most of the time the fronts have more bass output. You wouldn't want to use the rears to power the subwoofer. One of the other options for this, which is for what I was thinking about doing, channel 1 and 2 can be your sub channel. I know what you're thinking. It's only 320 watts. But if you're running just a single subwoofer, 320 watts for that subwoofer is a decent amount of power. That will allow us to run 110 watts to the tweeter and 160 watts to the mid bass. So we get a ton of mid bass. That's, I think, how we're actually going to hook this up in the lab. Another option for hooking this up is if you're going to use it as a true highs amp, in which case you could run rear into 1 and 2 and use this for the rear speaker, and then if you had a set of components up front, run front into 3 and 4 and do the same thing we just talked about. Use channels 3 and 4 to power your tweeters, 5 and 6 to power your mid bass. You want to pay attention when you're doing one of these staggered power amplifiers where the bigger channel goes. Along with some of the ideas that we just gave you on mode 2 and mode 4, in the owner's manual they do put a considerable amount of time into showing you other options of what we talked about. This whole section here on these 2 pages, as well as the last page here, kind of goes over some options that you may be interested in doing. But I guess the one thing to keep in mind is that all the channels are full range channels. They're all bridgeable. adjustable, and you could do a lot of things with them. Get to the bias control. It's located on the bottom of the amplifier. So let's flip this thing over. Here are the 3 bias controls, channel 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and way over here are 5 and 6. What do they do? Bias setting affects the operation mode of the amplifier. It is a continuously adjustable min actual class AB mode to max closer to class A mode. An amplifier in class A mode sounds warm and creates a pleasant atmosphere. Compared to that, the class AB mode of an amplifier sounds more direct and dynamic. What that means for you and I is, let's say we're going to run tweeters on 1 and 2, mid bass here, and a subwoofer on 5 and 6. Tweeters, of course, are the speaker that really, it's where the sizzle is. We'd set this up for maximum bias, more like the class A, like they're describing. The mid-range, well, we'd probably go about halfway on it. We want it to still sound very rich and dynamic, but we don't need to go full class A. The subwoofer, we just want this thing to just bang. So we're gonna set that all the way down to min, closer to that class AB, because we just want a very powerful sound, and we want to do it as efficiently as possible. And with efficiency, that takes us to the next part. Depending on the bias settings, the current consumption of the amplifier is growing the closer the operation comes to class A mode, leading to an increased temperature. The power rating, however, remains identical. So naturally, the harder you work the amplifier, the more heat the amplifier is going to create. This function here intrigues me. I can't wait to get this in the car because I've never set up an amplifier with adjustable bias. Definitely want to see how that works, and we will be doing some A/B comparisons between with it down and with it up. But as far as the heatsink goes and all of that, well, I know you guys want to see what's underneath this because you can see that row of capacitors right there, and I know it just has to be tantalizing. I'm going to pop the top off this. With the bottom off, we'll do a slow pan over the top of the amplifier so you can take in all the joy. The MOSFETs are all located on the bottom side of the amp board here. They're not attached to the back wall. The fan is located here. This is a large open cavity for that air to blow in. On the opposite side of the amplifier, it is a perforated area. I'm just kind of digging the color, I'm not gonna lie. I really like the contrast between the red and the orange. It just looks very pleasing to the eye, for sure. There's no doubt about it. With the bottom back on, let's take a look at how the bottom brackets attach. One other thing I'd like to note is this sticker right over here. This is a description of what the mode 2 and 4 button do. In case you go to install it and you forget what it's for, it's located on the bottom of the amplifier. I'm assuming that's for much later down the road if someone were to pick one of these up and they didn't have the owner's manual. One other thing that's located in the box is this little guy right here, which is a bag of screws. In the bag of screws, we also have a backup set of fuses. There are 4 large coarse head screws used to attach this to the bracket that you're going to make for it, and then there's 6 smaller machine screws to attach the legs. The legs, if you'll notice, have this little bend in them. That is so they can clear the side of the amplifier. There's 3 holes located here, as well as 3 identical holes located on the other side. Place the 2 brackets in place. Now keep in mind, you could also do some form of a custom mount if you wanted, where you don't have to use these. It's entirely up to you. It is a Phillips thread. And now you have 2 screw holes located on either end of the amplifier to affix it to whatever you're going to mount it to. Now a couple more specifications about this amplifier that some of you may be interested in. Dampening factor is greater than 150. Frequency response is 10 to 30,000 hertz. Input sensitivity is 1 to 6 volts, plus or minus 5%. And with that, we're going to start getting this into the car so we can hear how it sounds. Good morning, guys, and welcome to another episode of Real World Amp Dynos. That's right, real world. We want to see what these amplifiers do at 13.6, not that 14.4 rating. Today we have the Ground Zero GZ UA 6.200 SQ Plus amplifier. That's right, before this goes into the lab, we wanted to run it through its paces on the amp dyno. Stay tuned. One of the things that a lot of people were curious about was the variable bias on the bottom of the amplifier. Some of you guys think if you turn that up, you'd actually get more power. I don't think that's the case. It might consume more power, but it's not going to give us more wattage. and some of you guys thought it would. Either way, how we're gonna break this down is channels 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 are designed to give us that 110 watts at 14.4. So we're gonna see what it does at 13.6. And then channels 5 and 6 are designed to give us 160 watts at 14.4. We can also bridge channels 5 and 6 to mono, and that is 640 at 14.4. So we really wanna see what this bad boy is gonna do. Real world, 13.6 volts. Let's get it hooked up to the dyno, turn it on, see what kind of numbers this thing puts out for us. To make sure that this test is as lifelike as possible, we've loaded down all the channels that are not being used with a load resistor bank to draw the most amount of power from our power supply as possible, just like it would in your car. First test we're going to do on channels 1 and 2 is the certified dyno run. We'll follow that up with uncertified and then dynamic. When we get done with channels 1 and 2, we'll move on to 5 and 6, where we'll repeat the same 3 as well as see what it does in mono for a 5th channel sub option. First test is going to be the certified 4 ohm test. 92, 93 at the 4 ohms, 13.52 volts. Next test is certified 2 ohm. 162, 165, 13.48. Moving on to the uncertified 4 ohm test. 92, 93, 13.54. Uncertified 2 ohm. 163, 168, 13.48 volts. Dynamic burst mode, 4 ohm. 94, 95, 13.54. Dynamic burst at 2 ohm. 163, 168, 13.48 volts. We are going to try a certified run at 4 and 2 ohms with the bias turned all the way up. The bias isn't designed to give us more power, but some of you have thought that it may. And just to show that it's not made for that, we'll do the test. Certified 4 ohm, bias turned all the way up. 92, 93, pretty similar to what we got out of it with the bias turned down. 13.54 volts. 162, 165 at 13.48. We're seeing very similar power outputs. If you'd like to know more about the bias, make sure you check out our unboxing video of it. We do cover it in greater detail. Moving on to channels 5 and 6, certified 4 ohm, 143, both channels, 13.54 volts. Same test, 2 ohm, 235, 236 at 13.49 volts. Next up is the certified runs. First will be 4 ohm, 143 and a 151 at 13.54. Time for the 2 ohm run, 237 and 249 at 13.48. And last but not least for channels 5 and 6 is our dynamic power run, 4 ohm, 143 and 150, 13.53. 2 ohm is next with a 261 and a 257 at 13.5 volts. Channel 5 and 6 can be bridged to run a subwoofer to make this a 5-channel amplifier. We'll be testing that at 4 ohm, certified dyno run. And that gives us 485 watts at 13.43. Uncertified run at 4 ohms is next. 495 at 13.43. Time to do the dynamic power run at 4 ohms. 538 at 13.43 volts. Alright guys, this has been the real world amp dyno of the Ground Zero GZ UA 6.2 SQ Plus uranium amplifier. Remember, we're just keeping it real here. Thank you guys so much for watching and have a great day as always.
Bye.
Well, there goes the laptop. The first step for me is getting this giant sexy tweeter into the car. In the previous install, we had come up with a mounting system like this that allowed us to tap into these 2 existing screws and hold the tweeter in place. This is a pretty good idea. The difference is this particular tweeter has wires coming out of both sides, so I need to go back into the computer and redesign this a little bit so that there's a provision for wires on both sides. Basically this, which was the first test to do that. The idea idea is that the tweeter would slide into place just like this, and then we could bolt it down into place. This was really close. We had to do a little bit more modification to it, which got us this guy here. This moved things around just a tad bit more, but allows us to get our tweeter mounted firmly in place into the factory holes. The other thing we had to do was print off some little spacers, these guys here, because the tweeter sits up a little bit higher. Peeling the paper off, and with a little bit of patience, it's all lined up, spaced properly, mounted in there nice and tight. Lined up with the hole here. This is now ready to go in. I'm gonna hand these off to Fernando so we can get them into the car. And I can work on the other side. Tweeters are back secured into the car. On the tweeter, there's a solid wire and there's a stripe wire. The stripe wire is the positive. That means the non-stripe wire is the negative. Next is to get the mid-bass in. As you can see, Fernando has his door all sound treatment up and is using the fast string. When using a fast string, make sure you put it on the outside of the speaker, don't put it onto the top of the speaker. For this reason, if you ever have to take the speaker out, you don't want to destroy the fast string. And with Fernando out of the way, it's screwed into place and we can get a much nicer view of it. That black on black dust cap looks very sexy in there. You won't have to worry about that showing through the door panel, but man, just knowing it's there, that's pretty sexy. Good job, Fernando. Fernando's getting the subwoofer ready. This is a dual 2 ohm driver. That means we're gonna have to wire it up in series. Positive here, loop around, to the negative here. This positive and this negative will be what are going to go off to our speaker cup. The nice thing about these terminals, they're just like on an amplifier, so we can use wire ferrules. And he's also taken the extra time to add in a braided loom. Here's his ends here. Speaker cup is all soldered into place and ready to go. When we put an amplifier in the lab, it's just made to sit back there. We don't have to mount it to anything. But this is a big, heavy amplifier. We want to mount it to something because we don't want to have this sliding around back there. We want to make sure it's attached to something firmly. We also need to, on that, is be able to flip it up so we can get to the bias adjustment. Wiring this up is going to be a bit different as far as how you're going to think of what you would do with this. It's 6 channels, and most people go tweeters 1 and 2, mid bass 3 and 4, subwoofer 5 and 6. But each channel is the same, meaning 1 and 2 and 5 and 6 are exactly the same. You could run this on 3 subs. The crossovers are all the same. Everything is the same. But it has that mode 2 and mode 4 switch. Mode 2, you put the RCAs into 1 and 2, and it fills everything. In mode 4, you have inputs 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and 3 and 4 occupies 5 and 6. In this car, a subwoofer output and a front output. Plan is to turn on mode 4, run subwoofer into 1 and 2, 3 and 4 will be tweeter, 5 and 6 will be mid-range. That way we can use those inputs to populate just the front and just the sub. That means 1 and 2 is going to have low pass on, not the high pass, and we don't need the 10-time multiplier switch. If we want to do a subsonic filter, then yes, we can turn on the high pass, which we may once we get in there and start tuning it. Mode 4 switch is on, high pass 3 and 4 is on, and the 10-time multiplier, because we're running a tweeter. Low pass are both off. At 5 and 6, high pass is on, the 10-time multiplier is off. Low pass is on with the 10-time multiplier. That'll give us our band pass. We are going to be running this without a DSP because we want to let the amplifier do all the work. It would be real simple to hook up a DSP to this and just let that do all our crossover points, but we thought it's got it. Not everyone is going to be using a DSP. Let's set it up. First step is to get this secured to the board, but I really wish I could drill some holes in here for where this is going to go. I have an idea. With the amplifier screwed into place, I'm going to unscrew it now, remove the bottom, mark where my areas are, and then screw the amplifier back together. That way I can drill my holes through in the exact spot. I could measure it and do a whole grid thing, but there's only like 8 screws on here. It should go pretty fast. We have the 3 holes to easily get to our bias. Power and ground is located on this side over here, which is convenient because so is our power distribution block. Our RCAs are also located on this side. We don't need really long runs of each one of them. Let's get going. I've prepped the wiring for the amplifier install. The first wire I have here is the sub wire. It's a dual 12 gauge. We run independently. It's not a joined because it gives it way more flexibility. According to the bridged, which is located on the bottom, not here on the top, positive goes first or towards the left, negative is towards the right. If you're going to use some form of distortion detector or crossover calibrator, when putting your speaker wires in, don't tighten them down all the way. Leave them kind of loose, just enough to hold the wire in place, except for on the subwoofer. You really don't have to do it on the subwoofer because you can easily just leave your subwoofer disconnected and use the wire ends here if you need to. Next is our tweeter. We've prepared the wire with wire ferrules on the ends. We use a twisted gray and white, and then we usually add in either an orange or a yellow, and that denotes tweeter. I'm going to tighten these up just enough to hold the wire. Moving on to 5 and 6. Same as these, we have a white, we have a gray, and the stripe we put on this is black. If there was also a mid-range, that would be blue. These are going to run off to the driver's side of the car. That is in the back. Here's where our connections are. We're going to zip tie these down into place. To get our holes lined up, we are going to use the wire ruler. You can pick up the wire ruler at Mobile Solutions, and it comes in a bunch of different colors. Where I'd like to put these holes, I have plenty of room. I don't need to tuck them into the amp. I'm going to use the other part of the wire ruler as my spacer. I drilled my first hole in to find out how far away I want it to be, and I can use that to line these up with the rest of the holes. Once the wire gets to this end point here, it's going to turn and go straight up. For the zip ties, I'm going to be coming up through this front hole closest to me, around, back, and down, and that's going to put this head towards the surface of the amplifier. The reason for that is I need to run these RCAs also this same way, and I want to have that head out of the way of this hole here closer to me so that I can then put the next zip tie into it. Tip your amp board up a little bit, feed it through, line it up. Make sure you don't pull these too tight. You want to be able to service them and get them in and out of place. Once you have them where you want them, pull the zip tie tight. When cutting zip ties, make sure you use some form of a flush cutter. That way you don't hurt yourself. With that first row of zip ties in, if we look at the back here, you can see what I was talking about with all the heads lined up in one direction. This hole is open. That'll allow us to feed our next zip tie in, and our head will be located at that hole. And we did the same along the side here. Next is going to be my 2 RCAs. They're going to come around and follow these same speaker wires and loop in. For the RCAs, we're going to be using 2 3-footers. One, we've put our white and gray ends on to differentiate from our subwoofer. They're going to go into 3 and 4, and our sub will go into 1 and 2. Figure out where your hole needs to go, and then drill away. RCAs have a tendency to want to twist when you're putting them in. To prevent that, put one of them in and just kind of work it until you get it to where it's going to lay flat, and then you can easily, when this is nice and limp, plug it into the top piece. Do the same on both. I'm trying to get these RCAs to lay flat against one another like this. Either way works. Like, you can lay them on top, you can lay them side by side, but I want them to lay neat next to one another. Lace your first one through and pull the RCAs back until you have enough there again to pull them in and out just like you did these. Don't make them super tight. Take your time at this point and get it right where you want it, and pull it tight. I like to pick one that's not my first hole, so I went over one. Now I can come back and add in that zip tie. Make sure that they're loose at this point and that nothing is pulled tight. Pull them in and out and check them, because when you only have 2 zip ties in, it's way easier to fix than if you have a whole row in and you're like, I really don't like how tight that is. Now I'm gonna go back and fix it. You got to start over. That kind of no fun. With the RCAs in place, the last thing I need to do, which I was saving, is this subwire. It really just needs to come over to here. Nothing spectacular, and it doesn't need to tuck up into this at all. We have plenty of room. It just needs to come and turn this way For this, I'm just gonna drill my first hole to line up the logo. I want that to stay straight. Also, as I'm doing this, I'm putting my finger on here and I'm actually creating a bend here so that it rides over the top of these wires. And then once I get it to the height I want, pull that zip tie and that'll lock that bend in place. This is why we like to do individual wires, is because now I can make this turn fairly easily and I don't have a kinked up wire underneath there or anything like that. I can use my short wire ruler for this, push this up into place where I want it. Add in that first zip tie, and when you do that, pull the wire into the angle that you're looking for. Hold it, lock it into place. Once you get that second one in, that wire is not going anywhere. One thing I like to do that I've never really mentioned is on this last set of holes, here and then over here where the speaker are, I take the 8-inch zip tie, which is thicker and stronger, and I put that through, and that just kind of finishes off these wires here on the end a little better than the 4-inch zip tie. All the sound side is done. That leaves me just this right here, which is the power section. I've made up 2 runs of 4-gauge, 1 ground, 1 power, and a 3rd run of remote turn on. Covered them in braided flex loom. First up is the ground. When running these wires, you kind of got to figure out what needs to go where and which one of these you're going to put in first. If you're up against a short distance here, we're definitely want to do the outside wire. If you have to make a quick turn, then you'd want to do the inside wire. These are things that you have to think about when building your amp rack. 4-gauge fits in here beautifully with the ferrule on it. Tighten it down. Add in the remote turn on. These only need to come up about halfway like this and turn. Looking at this, the main power is definitely where we want to start fixing into place. I'll make my first hole here so I know where I want them to be. Short wire ruler will work great on this. For this, I need to make sure that the head is towards the back side here, because my next one is going to come through this hole. I like to get my first and last zip tie, mainly my last zip tie, so that I don't have to worry about it flopping constantly off the end of the amp board. And naturally the first one so I can position it properly. I get it where I want it, tighten that one up. Leave the last one loose for now. Get that second one in place. Line them both up nice and straight. Pull those zip ties tight and then flush cut them off. When you get to the edge of an amp rack like this, sometimes drilling a hole in here is more or less pointless. You can easily just wrap the zip tie around the edge. Just drilling one row of holes sometimes make a lot more sense. The head is along the outside here because I need this hole open for the ground. And that is the power side all done, tucked in and routed around to where it will go into the car. And this is the final. This is what she's gonna look like. Since I finished the amp rack, Fernando has set it into the car and got it into place, hooking up power and ground and plugging in the RCAs. The next task is to set the gains, and then once the gains are set, we're going to set the crossover points. It's critical that we set the crossover points with accuracy because we don't want to damage the tweeters. For this, I would either recommend, hopefully you're using a DSP, maybe a radio that has network mode, or if you're a fan of the SMD tools, the CC1 crossover calibrator. You can also keep an eye on it with an RTA if you're looking at like what's going on there, but the CC1 will give you your best luck. Let's get started. To do this, we're gonna play some test tracks from up front. I'll be back here turning the dials and yelling at him what I'd like him to do. Make sure when you're doing distortion detection that the speakers are not connected to the amplifier. That's a good way to blow your speakers for sure. They're not made to do what you're testing for. I know, it's ridiculous. To use a DD1 or a DD1 Plus, one lead is going to attach to ground. The other one is going to attach to, most of the time, the positive speaker terminal, but sometimes it will be the negative speaker terminal, so don't freak out if it doesn't work. We'll do the highs first. 1000 hertz, -5. Turn up the volume. All the way out. We have a blue light indicating we are good. We have a green light indicating signal. We'll start slowly turning up the volume knob. And that top light will light up red when it's So you don't want it on. So turn it until it's gone. We're good there. We'll go to our next set of channels. We have signal, do the same thing. Now it's on to the sub channel where we're gonna play 40 hertz. When setting your subwoofer level control, be honest with yourself. If you have a subwoofer level control on the radio that you're gonna be using, make sure you turn that up. Turn all of it up. So you want the maximum amount of features turned up. And then if you're gonna use negative 10 dB, it'll make sense because you'll have some control to turn things down. Remember, a lot of the times you're turning up to turn down. I know that sounds strange. But either way, our gains are set. Now we're gonna move on to the crossover calibrator, which is always a little bit more fun. The crossover calibrator has gator clips that are gonna clip onto the output of the amplifier. Be careful when doing this because the amplifier is on and you don't want those gator clips to touch, as you could damage your amplifier. On the crossover calibrator, it has a couple lights, power and signal. When the signal is green, you're within its perfect operation. When it is red, you need to turn it down. You have on, off, and read. When you select read, you have these two arrows here at the top. There's a blue light in the middle, and the idea is that you're gonna turn this up and down until you find the frequency that you're looking for. Kind of see it going up and down there. So we need to get it right in the middle. Boom. That doesn't happen that often. I'm actually really proud of myself. We'll move on to setting up channels 5 and 6, which is going to be a bandpass. To set the bandpass, we're going to use that same 2600 hertz that we set the tweeter crossover at, but now we're gonna set it on the low pass side. We'll do that first, and then we'll turn those off, and we'll set what we want the bottom of the mid-range to be. So we've just set the top, meaning we want it to play up to that, and then of course the tweeter will take over. Now we'll set the high pass, which is gonna be 80 hertz for the mid bass. Each time you go to use your crossover calibrator, shut it off, turn it back on, you want it fresh and ready to go. All right, we're back on, he's playing 80 hertz. I got my green light there. I'll select read and see, it's like, oh man. Boom, there we go. We have 80 hertz. Now that we have those, turn back on the low pass, and now we've created the band pass between 2.6 or 2600 and 80. And since it's playing 80 hertz, we now move on to the subwoofer to set that. Cycle calibrator, it's still within range. Select read, low pass on. So close, come on, get there, get there. Just a hair, perfect. If you want, you could also set up a subsonic filter because this still has a bandpass capability, and a subsonic filter is basically a bandpass for the subwoofer. Something like 25 hertz, 30 hertz, something like that, you can. And just to do that, we might as well. Just like you did on the mid bass, turn off the crossover and turn on the high pass. We have signal now, select read. And that's it. Now we have a 25 hertz subsonic filter. Turn back on the low pass filter. And just like that, you're done. Don't rush these things. These things take time. Next, mentally go through and look at the amplifier and make sure everything is turned on that needs to be turned on, because we were turning a lot of things on and off. Looking at channels 1 and 2, low pass is on, high pass is on, acting as a subsonic. Moving on to our front, high pass on, and the 10-time multiplier switch, and input mode 4, which means these RCAs here are feeding this and this. And then on channels 5 and 6, bandpass, the high pass on without the 10-time multiplier switch because this is our 80 hertz. Low pass is on with the 10-time multiplier switch because this is mimicking this over here. So this is our 2.6 or 2600. Gains are set. Almost time to rock and roll. We're going to turn this thing off. We're going to hook our speaker wires up into the car. We'll do a quick polarity check to make sure that everything is correct, and then I get to listen to it. We'll bring you along for the polarity check, but not for the boring wiring part, because it's boring. It's all up in place. The lab is good. One of the things we haven't touched on yet is the subwoofer enclosure that we're using. This is a custom-made ported enclosure. It's designed to sit in the back of Fernando's car, the lab facing up. Wanted to make sure we got enough airspace to do this subwoofer justice, and seeing how all of our equipment is towards the front of the car, it only makes sense to put it towards the back, and it's at the slight wedge, push the sound forward. One of the things to think about, when we set up those gains, we set those up for maximum volume. That doesn't mean we have to leave them there. A lot of people wanna, I gotta get, no. What we're just trying to figure out is how loud we can play those, but more than likely, we're gonna need to go in and turn them down. We know where the ceiling is. We don't have to go all the way up to the ceiling. We can bring them down because we have to blend the tweeter with the mid-range. Something you don't really do in a DSP, but we're gonna be doing it at the amplifier. And most of the time the tweeters do need to attenuate down some because they're, one, higher, two, way more efficient than the mid-range. And if they're drowning out the mid-range, then it just doesn't sound right. That's where listening to it comes in. But before we listen to it, as I said, time to do a polarity check. The familiar sound of polarity pop. Green's on my side. There's a green there. 2 greens in a row, we're all good. Anytime you unscrew the speaker wires, make a new connection, or do anything like that, I don't care how expert you are, always do a polarity pop. All it takes is one distraction to screw the whole thing up. This armrest.
Yeah.
Feels good.
Somebody like make a hole the other day in here, so.
Who remembers that in the video? I don't know if that even made the cut. I dropped something on his armrest and totally ripped it, so I bought him a new armrest, obviously, because I ripped it. Before we let you guys hear it, we're gonna play some DRM free stuff for you. We were playing some of our normal music that we typically tune a car to. This is Fernando's car, even though it is the lab. That's why I'm sitting over here. These things sound great. I want to turn the tweeters down because I feel they're just coming in a little hot. He, of course, is like, nope, these are perfect.
That's good, that's good.
They're perfect. Yeah. These things, they sound fabulous. These are some of like the best out of the box, put them in the car and listen speakers that I've ever heard. They sound fabulous. They did a really nice job. And even though I feel like the tweeter is too loud, I've just turned the volume down and it's a, you know, it makes me happier. They're very crisp for a dome, for a soft dome. Very crisp, very accurate, they have a lot of that sizzle. How would you describe it?
Soft dome tweeter. They're very crispy. They're very nice.
Fair disclosure, these are broken in. These aren't fresh out of the box. They've actually been in the car for a good 6 months.
A little bit more, yeah.
Or longer. Yeah. So these are fully broken in.
Oh,
they're not like, hey, we just put them in. No, these are fully broken in. But even when we originally put them in, they sounded great. For those guys out there, I know some are going, wait, what? I thought subwoofers just broke in. No. All speakers break in. Yeah. Some do it faster than others. Now it's your turn. Now we're going to play some of the DRM free stuff so you guys can take a listen. Like that snap. It's just right away. It doesn't drag out. It's just like
the mid bass is.
Yeah. Oh, the mid bass is kicking it. It has way more power. Yeah. So we're using that 5 and 6 for the mid bass. We have less power going to the subwoofer, but we have that big up front sound.
I like it.
That song, there's like some little stuff going on in the background that you can totally hear, and on a normal system you wouldn't even know it was there. It's kind of funny. Alright, well that's what it sounds like normally. Well, one of the cool things about this amplifier is the variable bias. And I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for us to play with that. Right now we have it set to minimum. We're gonna turn the tweeter up to maximum, and we're gonna adjust the mid bass to about 12 o'clock, just to just because we can. We're gonna leave the subwoofer alone. It doesn't need anything more. We're not worried about that. But the tweeter is where I feel most of you are most curious, because the higher the bias number, the closer it becomes to an A amplifier as opposed to an AB class amplifier. And if you recall, we drilled these holes in the bottom. We'll play the same tracks that we listened to before. Something different, and I know this because the tweeters aren't bothering me the way they bothered me before.
Okay.
Like, because you know how I wanted to turn them down? That's gone. Like, now to me they sound different, but in a better way. Like, there was an annoying. That's why I was like, can I turn them down? You're like, no. And by doing that, I don't think it changed it. Like, it's not like a night and day difference. It's not like, oh my god, but
right.
There was something there that was bugging me that isn't bugging me anymore. Playing that same song, like when that really loud click, snapping comes on. It was too much before, and that's why I reached over to turn it up, because I was like, well, wait a minute, let me turn it up, and there's just something different. I wish I could sit here and be like, oh my god, it's this.
Right.
But it's
it
not.
Blends better.
It maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta remember, most amplifiers, the bias is done by engineers. They set this stuff up. They're going for a specific sound or efficiency or something like that. So having a variable bias is definitely, like, it's a toy, and it's not anything that you can just sit there and be like, oh yeah, and like I said, he can't hear it. He's not hearing it.
No.
For him, this means absolutely nothing. But to me, something different. The mid bass sounds the same. I don't think.
I will lie if I say, oh yeah, I mean, I can.
No, and that's why.
Exactly. No, I was like, I want to play different music that I listen every day, so I can see.
Well, yeah, it'd be nice if you could just, like, it would be cool if there was a switch,
cool.
like up front,
dude.
you can press a button.
Yeah.
That'd be fun. But there isn't. All right, let's play another song. Alright guys, I would like to thank Ground Zero for sending us this uranium product and letting us have this amount of fun with it. This has definitely been, for us, one of the funnest labs we've had the opportunity to do. The labs are a fun thing for us because it gives us the ability to try out new things, and this was definitely a new thing for us.
Alright guys, on to the next one.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.